You're listening to the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast with Matt Curtis. This is the podcast that helps you take your creative team from wherever you are today to healthy and effective.
Hey friends, thank you so much for joining me this week on the podcast. I'm very excited about this week's episode. It actually was born out of a Facebook conversation that I had recently. Someone asked the question, my boss wants to see my schedule. They want to see my calendar. How do you, as a creative, go about calendaring out your week so that you can give someone visibility and it helps everyone understand when we're reaching a threshold of being too busy? It was a really, really good question because it actually points to a couple different layers of difficulty. The first here, this person is likely serving in a context where there is no way that they're going to be able to get a real firm grasp of their schedule ahead of time. So I've served in creative ministry for over 16 years, and I never once had the reliability of my weekly schedule at a level where I could book my times in advance. It just wasn't possible. I think there's two different types of communications teams that exists in the church. I think there's reactive, which I would say is the vast majority. What that means is ministry leaders invent new ideas. Now it's comm's job to support them. The creative team, whatever that looks like in your context, whether it's video, whether you involve productions, whether you involve just communications, somebody on that team is going to be involved in making sure that event happens. So that's a very reactive model. And then you have a proactive model where comm is positioned a little bit more like a ministry in the sense that they're initiating what they're doing. They're initiating messaging. They're still supporting the core things of the organization, like the weekend services and some of those major initiatives, giving campaigns or year-end campaigns, the big promotion for Christmas, that kind of stuff. But they're really positioned to say, what are the ministries doing? Which ones do we want to elevate and promote based on the objectives that we have as a ministry to be able to reach new people, get people in the door, etc. A reactive team tends to get overwhelmed pretty quickly because if everyone on staff has a new idea, there's a bunch of new projects that come down the road. And so that was the context that I lived in. And my assumption is that that's the context that the person posting this question lives in as well. That's the primary context that I'm going to speak to in this conversation here, because I want to help you, whether you're in leadership or whether you're the creative, I want to help you figure out the pathway to communicate meaningfully. What I'm not looking for here is, I told my boss that I'm busy and they didn't do anything about it, and so now I'm quitting. Okay, this is real. This happens. This happens regularly, in fact. I've been overwhelmed for 3 years. Nobody's helped me. I've heard that numerous times. I don't want that to be a conversation that's happening in the church. I don't want that to be a conversation that's happening in your church. It doesn't have to be. This is the story that led to the conclusion. I feel very fortunate that I was able to crack this over time, and it wasn't just my efforts. I had a lot of bright thinkers around me that were helping me as we were trying to navigate this. So early in my career, I spent my time advocating for myself by trying to bring people into my world. I would go and I would say, the reason this is taking so long is because I need to create a form on the website, and then I need to create another document on the server. And then what I need to do is I need to have the two communicate. And it's like, okay, whoever I was talking to, unless it was a programmer or another designer, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. And because of that, I'm not going to be able to have any frame of reference on time. So if the criticism or the complaint or the struggle is, I have too much stuff on my plate from a time perspective, they're not going to be able to help at all, because there's no way for them to begin to understand the complexities that I'm talking about in relation to time. And so where this really kind of came to a head for us was, I would say it was a breaking point. As an organization, we had made the decision that we were going to have a conference. There were some ideologies that we believed to be very helpful for ministry, and we were going to have a conference so that we could help communicate that to churches that were interested in growing in this area. There were a lot of churches that were asking us questions, and so it was like, great, formalize it, make it a conference. Everybody comes to that one thing, and then the information can be distributed there. So that was the approach. And so we sit down as an entire staff, and we say, what are the things in your area that you need represented at this conference? And I'm sitting there. And my eyes are getting bigger and bigger because every ministry is putting on 2 or 3 different sessions. And I'm thinking to myself, oh dear, how is this all going to get pulled off? At that point, I was over communications and productions, and I'm looking around thinking to myself, I don't I don't know how we're going to pull this off. Because, by the way, we were hired to support the weekends and the ministry staff for the ministry of the church. We weren't hired to be conference putter-oners. And so we were facing this massive surge of work, not like a ministry leader coming up with a new initiative that was time-consuming. We're talking a massive influx of projects. I have learned at this point, fortunately, that I can't just tell leadership, this is complicated and hard and will take time. It's not going to cut it. So I sat down with my communications director and I said, okay, we're in trouble. We have to figure out how to explain that we're in trouble in a way that leadership understands, with two goals: either punt the conference and delay it, or reduce the amount of work that's being asked of us. Those are the two options, because we are going to have a bandwidth issue. And the challenge is that we are going to have to figure out how to not lose our team that's being completely pushed to its limits for a very long period of time because of the volume of stuff that's coming in. So we sat down and we bantered around. How do we present this in a way that makes sense to somebody who doesn't dig into the details of the day-to-day of design, of web design, print design, social promotion? Help me figure out, how do we do this? And so where we landed, which I think is a really, really smart place, and I've had great success with it since, and that's why I wanted to share it with you. Where we landed is we needed to do a good job of quantifying the time that it takes for us to do certain projects. I like to think of it like a menu. How long does it take you to design a postcard? How long does it take you to design a website? How long does it take you to design a poster? And think through like design and print. So we're talking the whole project. We're talking about intake. We're talking about execution. We're talking about sending it to print, whatever goes into the entirety of the process. We started tracking that for everything that we were doing. And we had multiple designers at the time. And so we had different designers tracking it. The reason we did this is because not all of our designers operated at the same speed. So you think if you have a junior designer and a regular designer and a senior designer, they should all operate at different speeds, presumably. Now, the caliber of work should be different too, but it's not like a senior designer takes 4 hours to do the same thing that a junior designer does. A senior designer does it both faster and better. That's why they're the senior designer. That's what experience gives you, speed and quality. That's typically why you pay them more, because money is going to be required. It's that choose any three: speed, quality, price. That's the primary thing that we wanted to attack. What is the average time that it takes us to execute these projects? And so we started tracking it like crazy. And so we bought these little things. They're called timulars. It's a physical device. There's a couple different options out there. That's the software, the platform that we've used. It's basically a time tracker. And so what we did is we said, hey, I'm going to start working on a postcard. Great. Track your time. Okay. Track the time. And we began to build this menu of sorts that would say, if you come to us as a team, you ask for event promotion. It's going to include a postcard, 3 posters, a social promotion, and a video. I can tell you roughly, I don't want to get into like deep micromanagement here, but I can tell you roughly the amount of personnel time that's going to go into this project. And the reason that's helpful is because now I can tell you mathematically why I'm busy. And that's the key. That was the key to opening the door between comm is overloaded and leadership understands. That's the key. We created this master spreadsheet and it listed all of the projects that were being asked of us. And then we went through and we assigned the amount of time that it was going to take. Here's the crazy part. We did this about 6 months before the conference was scheduled to launch or to go live. We budgeted out the time that it would take, and it would take, I think it was just over 1 year of time. We had to factor in vacation time. We had to factor in that sometimes people get sick. We looked at this document and we're like, it is literally impossible for us to be able to do this unless you hire another designer. So then we had a case for what a new designer being hired would actually do for the bottom line. And it became very clear that we either needed to hire a designer or we needed to reduce the amount of stuff that we're being asked to put out. And so that was the key. And so in this series on clarity, this is an inflection point that I have found for every creative department that I've been a part of. The non-creatives understanding the time spent of the creative will never happen without help from the creative side. And this to me has been the most effective way to do that. Start quantifying your time. So if you're a leader and you are leading a team of creatives, the best thing for you to do is to target a specific project and say, okay, I want to get a baseline on what it takes for us to do this. I want you to start tracking your time on this postcard. The way that these timing devices work, there's 8 different faces on it, and you can label, this is, this project, this project, this project. And then in the software, you can tag it that way. And then it can run a report for you. You can pull up the data and run a report, and you can get a sense of how much time you've spent in that specific type of thing. So in the case of a postcard, I would do it, a postcard for our trunk or treat. Perfect. Time, just that project. Just the postcard. And then you can see how much time did that one postcard take. And it's everything. It's the intake call. It's the meetings about it. It's everything that goes into it. Now it gives you a baseline. Do that over 3 or 4 different postcards, and then 3 or 4 different banners, and then 3 or 4 different whatever you face regularly in your organization. And now you have this baseline of time spent. I'm not talking about measuring every single thing that you could possibly do. You're going to have these one-offs and, all that. But measure those primary things, and what it does is it gives you a very clear indication of how much time is being allocated of your time toward projects in the organization. And it does 2 things for you. As the leader, it helps you recognize that a ministry leader just walked into the office and asked for 12 hours of your creative team's time, or single designer, if it's a single designer. Now you have to face this tension of like, do we want to give up 12 hours of time for this project? Maybe you have the margin for that. Maybe you don't. That's where the conversation becomes very meaningful. Now it's about time. It's about they're asking more from me than I am able to produce in the amount of time that I have allotted for my role. And then for the creative, this is what I've actually found as well. I've had a lot of creatives come to me and they've been like, I'm super overwhelmed. I have too much on my plate. And then we'll go through this exercise and we'll look at the different things that they have on their plate. And it actually turns out they only have 15 hours of work and it's Monday. Then it becomes a different conversation to say, okay, well, what is it that feels overwhelming about this? Because time-wise, you're fine. You have more than enough time to get it done. And then we begin to dig into that and it becomes a really helpful conversation about maybe even mindset. This is where, back to the tool series, this is where the Eisenhower box comes in. Okay, let's map your projects. Which ones are really important and really urgent? Talk to me about that. Because here's the tension. Let's say you have 40 hours ahead of you. It's Monday morning. You have 40 hours of your week ahead of you. And you have 12 hours of projects. It's like, man, no problem. Well, the problem is all 12 hours are due today. Oh yeah, now that's a problem. So the urgency level, the last minuteness, that's the problem. That's the issue. That's the primary concern when it comes to the well-being of the designer. This approach here, clarity around time, unearths so much, and it helps you pinpoint what the specific problem is that's going on. And then outside of like crisis management and problem management side of things, I love this tool as a measure to show improvement. Design is so tricky because I have really good designs that I've created today, and I have designs that I'm not as happy with. And I look back over my portfolio, I have projects that I'm happy with and still hold up, but I have others that don't. And so on some levels, it's hard to assess, have I grown as a designer or have I not grown as a designer? Time is one of the major components of whether or not you're growing as a designer. It's an indicator. I may be assessing the best piece you did 2 years ago and the worst piece that you did this year. Well, that's not a fair comparison. Yes, we critique the work from the past and from the present, and that is an indicator. You'll begin seeing that as well. But another place where I think is very valuable to assess growth is in the amount of time it takes you to get a project done. You're first hired and it takes you 4 hours to get a postcard done. Okay, that's a baseline. There's also this it can't take you more than that. If it takes you more than that, then maybe you shouldn't be on our team. So there's a standard that's set. And then from there, it becomes, hey, at year 2, you've cut your time in half. It now takes you 2 hours to design a postcard instead of 4. That's exceptional growth. So for me, it doesn't take me that long. It takes maybe an hour, sometimes 30 minutes. And the results are what they need to be. It's really interesting to watch time as an indicator of growth. So yes, in the very beginning, this was born out of, I need to justify to leadership that we're slammed. This idea for a conference is crazy. I have to win that battle because my team won't survive this season if I don't. But what came from it was a clarity around time that allows me to communicate effectively with leadership, communicate effectively with my design team, but then also measure progress and growth over time. When you can tell your designers or your creatives, wherever they are, hey, I've noticed that you've been growing in this area. It's a huge win. It's a huge win to be able to call out the places where you see growth and development happening. I would encourage you, if this is a tension that you face in your organization, running into this, we're too busy regularly, let's go a step deeper. Rather than just feel it all the time and figure out a way to power through it, let's begin adding some tangible numbers to stuff. Let's begin adding some visibility to time. When you have clarity around your time, you're going to help leadership, you're going to help your creatives, and you're going to help everyone in the process, your ministry leaders as well, because the conversations are going to shift out of being emotional conversations. I don't think you support my ministry. It's not about your ministry at all. It's about, I literally don't have time. We can't have that conversation unless we have numbers. So if you come into me and you say, hey, got a new project for you, I can tell you I got 12 hours of work ahead of that. So there's no way I can even get to it in time for the deadline that you're asking, which is end of day, unless you can help me figure out how to move some of this other time. So do you want to talk to the other ministry leaders and ask them to move their project back so I can insert your 4-hour block in sooner? It becomes a conversation about time. It removes the emotion from the not feeling like the ministry leaders supported. It's been a huge, huge catalyst for growth for me as a creative, leading creatives. And I suspect it'll be the same for you because this subject is so tense in the church. Whenever I feel like I am up against a hard deadline or too much volume of work and I don't know how to get through it, this is such a key to finding a release of tension quickly.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leading Healthy Creative Teams. This podcast is just one of the ways Lunchtime Heroes helps build healthy creative teams in the church. Stay up to date on the latest by signing up for the Creative Bites email at lunchtimeheroes.co.